God's master plan for the redemption of the world was rapidly moving to its climax. The trials had ended. The verdict, death by crucifixion. Had Jesus been an ordinary prisoner, he would not have died on the same day. For even then it was customary to allow a condemned prisoner time to prepare for death. But Jesus was no ordinary prisoner. He was so bitterly hated, so vehemently despised, that his enemies were determined that he must be put out of the way, and at once. And so before 9 o'clock in the morning, a few short hours after his arrest, Jesus was led out to Calvary. This was no quiet walk to the execution site. He was flanked not by warden and chaplain, but by 2 thieves. His body was bent under the weight of the cross and broken by the scourging and maltreatment of his captors. When at last they reached the crest of the hill, there was much to be done. 3 uprights to receive the crossbeams, 3 crossbeams to receive pierced hands, 3 men to be sacrificed on the altar of justice. With mixed emotions, the 3 men must have watched as each in turn submitted to the ordeal. 2 of them, understandably, were crucified by sheer force. The third submitted quietly, with a dignity that made men wonder. So it was that within the hour, the Son of God was suspended between heaven and earth, as though neither wanted him. The suffering Son of God looked down upon the world, and the men of the world returned his look. But they were not content to look. They were compelled to continue the jeers, the taunts, the mockery. In silence, he looked down from the cross, he against whom so many were directing their insults. And when he spoke, it was a word of prayer. Father, forgive them. They know not what they are doing. But the taunts and the jeers were coming not only from the leaders and the people on the ground. The 2 thieves themselves, crucified and suffering, joined their mockery to that of the crowd. Soon, however, one of them fell silent. We don't know why. It may be that Christ's prayers and attitude and the things the thief had heard about this man began to pierce his own soul. Whatever the reasons, it was surely the power of God which brought him to see in Jesus his Redeemer and Lord. Waiting for the noise of the mob to quiet down, he rebuked his blasphemous companion and said to the man on the cross in the middle, Lord, remember me when you come to your kingdom. For a fleeting moment, a smile played on the lips of Jesus. As with the majesty of a king and the warmth of godly love, he answered, I tell you the truth. Today you will be with me in paradise. We may feel it strange that this thief should have so much confidence in a man nailed to a cross, especially when we remember that he did not know what we know, the triumph that was to follow on the 3rd day, Easter. But that he had this faith cannot be doubted, for the Lord promised him paradise that very day. Turning from his enemies, and from an enemy who on Calvary had become his friend, Jesus turned his attention to those whom for years he had known and loved. Where were the men and women who were going to be so brave? Many of them were hiding for fear that they too may become involved, that they might share their Lord's condemnation. But at least 2 were at the foot of the cross. Mary, his mother, and John, the disciple whom the Lord loved. Here, in the finality of Calvary, Mary again saw herself back in the temple and heard the voice of Simeon as he told her, Many in Israel will fall and rise on account of this child. He will be a sign against which people will talk, and many will show what they think in their hearts. And pain, sharp as a sword, will also go through your heart. And now she understood. The uplifted cross, and to it was nailed her son. Probably John would have taken Mary into his home without being told. But Jesus was providing for his mother as he said, "Woman, there is your son. Son, there is your mother." It was dark. This darkness, which lasted from 12 unto 3 in the afternoon, was strange, unnatural. In a sense, it was like the light which had shattered the darkness of the night 33 years earlier, when shepherds outside Bethlehem had been given the glorious news of Jesus' birth. But now day was turned to darkness. Jesus was alone in the dark, for he and he alone could now fulfill God's plan. But his loneliness was caused more by his separation from his Father than by any earthly darkness. Only one thing can separate us from the face of God: sin. Although he was the sinless Son of God, he had taken on himself all sins of all times. This was what separated him from God. This was the cause of his loneliness. This separation from his Father's face and any comfort from him caused Jesus to cry out in the darkness, "Why?" From eternity he had known why he was to be here. But now the all-knowing Jesus asked, "Why?" Into the mind of the man Jesus had crept the darkness, which for a moment did not allow him to see clearly his purpose in coming and being crucified. From this moment of darkness in his tortured soul, the equivalent to the whole of eternity in hell, came the cry, my God, why do you forsake me?" From the darkness of the day, from the darkness of a soul which had lost all contact with God, Jesus again became conscious of the suffering of his body. His lips were parched, his tongue swollen. He had endured the pangs of hell, and with hell defeated, he realized his need for physical relief as he stated simply, "I am thirsty." In response, one of the soldiers put a sponge soaked in sour wine on a reed and offered him a drink. For a while, at least, it brought relief to the dying Savior of mankind. Then, having fulfilled the master plan of God, having atoned for the sins of man, he issued the proclamation which echoed through the chambers of hell and the halls of heaven: "It is finished." Some of the crowd about the cross had left for their homes. They had been present at the one event which had shaken the foundations of the world. And then, as now, there were only two kinds of people in the world: the believers and the unbelievers, the saved and the damned. Part of the crowd stayed beneath the cross, some because of love, some because of duty, some out of curiosity, and some because they wanted to see him die. At last they had him where they wanted him, and they were not about to leave until the very end. For a moment, he hung still on the cross. Some thought him dead. There was silence, a thick, penetrating silence that made men shiver. At last, he lifted his head to call out, "Father, into your hands I entrust my spirit." The Son of God had died. And so God's master plan, the central truth of Christianity, neared its completion. For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believeth in him should not perish, but have everlasting life. God's master plan needed only the glory which came on a bright morning 3 days later.